I carved my name in whiskey and blood. I was a bootlegger in the 1920s, running moonshine and bathtub gin through the veins of Chicago, a city that chewed up dreamers and spat out monsters. The first time I held a Tommy gun, I felt like God and the devil rolled into one, and I'd spend the next decade learning which one I'd become. My tale begins in the shadow of Prohibition, where the law turned good men into outlaws and made the streets a battlefield for men like me, men who carved their names in whiskey and blood. The air in Chicago was thick with coal smoke and desperation in the spring of 1923. I was 22, a skinny kid from the South Side with a chip on my shoulder and a hunger for something bigger than the butcher shop where I'd spent my teenage years hacking at pig carcasses. The Volstead Act had turned liquor into gold, and I wasn't about to let the opportunity pass me by. My cousin Frankie, a wiry guy with a grin that could charm a nun, had been working for Johnny Torrio's outfit, running hooch from Canada to speakeasies across the city. One night, over a bottle of stolen rye, he leaned across the table at our family's cramped tenement and said, "Vinny, you got the guts to make real money?" I didn't hesitate. "Tell me how." Frankie's eyes glinted. "Meet me at the docks tomorrow, midnight. Bring a knife." The Chicago River was a black mirror under the moon when I arrived. My father's old switchblade heavy in my pocket. The docks smelled of fish and diesel, and the fog was so thick I could barely see the crates stacked like tombstones along the pier. Frankie was there with two other guys, Tommy Knuckles Malone, a bruiser with a face like a dropped pie, and Sal, a quiet type who always carried a rosary but never prayed. They were unloading barrels from a tugboat, the kind that carried Canadian whiskey across Lake Michigan under the noses of the Coast Guard. "Vinny," Frankie said, clapping my shoulder, "you're going to be our lookout tonight. Any trouble cops, Capone's boys, anybody, you whistle twice and run like hell." I nodded, my heart pounding like a drum. I didn't know then that Al Capone was already a name to fear, a shadow growing longer every day as he clawed his way up Torrio's empire. All I knew was the weight of that knife and the promise of cash in my pocket. I crouched behind a stack of crates, eyes scanning the darkness, ears pricked for any sound beyond the lapping water. That's when I heard it, a low rumble, like a truck engine, coming from the street. I whistled twice, sharp and quick. Frankie and the others froze, then scrambled to hide the barrels. Headlights cut through the fog, and a black Packard rolled up, its doors swinging open before it even stopped. 4 men spilled out, all in sharp suits, all carrying guns. The leader was a stocky guy with a scar running from his ear to his jaw. I'd later learn his name, Dino Moretti, one of Capone's enforcers. "Who's running this show?" Dino barked, his voice like gravel. Frankie stepped forward, hands raised. "Just a small operation, Dino. No need for trouble." Dino laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Trouble? Kid, you're stealing from the big man himself. You think Torrio don't know you're skimming his cut?" I stayed low, my breath shallow, but my hand was on the knife. Frankie was smooth, always had been, but I could see the sweat on his brow. "We ain't skimming, Dino. This is our own haul. Independent." Dino's smile vanished. "I ain't no such thing as independent in Chicago." He nodded to his men, who started smashing the barrels with crowbars. Whiskey spilled onto the dock, its sharp scent mixing with the river's stink. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then Sal, the quiet one, made a mistake. He reached for his rosary and Dino's gun was out in a flash. The shot was deafening. Sal crumpled, clutching his chest, his rosary beads scattering like marbles. Frankie screamed, lunging at Dino, but Knuckles held him back. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the blood, maybe it was the whiskey soaking my shoes, but I bolted from my hiding spot, knife in hand, and drove it into the arm of the guy nearest me. He howled, dropping his crowbar, and I was already running, Frankie's voice yelling, "Vinny, go!" I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away, my lungs burning, my hands shaking so bad I dropped the knife in an alley. That was my first night as a bootlegger. I'd seen a man die, stabbed another, and learned that in Chicago, loyalty was a currency you spent fast and regretted later. That night changed me, like a blade sharpening against stone. I didn't sleep, just sat in my mother's kitchen, staring at the cracked linoleum, the blood under my fingernails drying to a rusty brown. Frankie found me at dawn, his face pale, his grin gone. "Sal's dead," he said, voice flat. "Knuckles is in hiding. Dino's boys took the hall, but they didn't get us. That's something." "Something?" I snapped, my voice louder than I meant. "I stabbed a guy, Frankie. What the hell happens now?" He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like a ghost between us. "Now? We get smarter, Vinny. We don't cross Capone again. We join him." I stared at him, my stomach twisting. Joining Capone meant stepping into a machine that ground men to dust, but staying independent meant a bullet or a river grave. I was young, scared, and already in too deep. "What's the play?" I asked. Frankie leaned in, his eyes sharp. "Torio's losing his grip. Capone's the future. He's got a speakeasy on Clark Street, the Four Deuces. We go there, prove we're worth more alive than dead. You got guts, Vinny? That stunt with the knife? Capone liked that." 2 nights later, we walked into the Four Deuces, a brick-fronted joint disguised as a cigar shop. The air inside was thick with jazz and the sweet burn of gin. Men in pinstripes laughed too loud, dames in flapper dresses draped over their arms. Frankie led me to the back, past a velvet curtain, where Al Capone sat like a king on a throne of mahogany and cigar smoke. He was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with a round face and eyes that didn't blink. Dino was at his side, his arm bandaged from my knife. "Well, well," Capone said, his voice smooth as velvet but sharp underneath. "Frankie Russo and the kid who thinks he's a hero. Sit." We sat. My mouth was dry, but Frankie was all charm. "Mr. Capone, we made a mistake at the docks. Didn't know it was your territory. We want in real in. We can run hooch, muscle, whatever you need." Capone leaned back, puffing his cigar. "You cost me a shipment, Frankie. And you," he pointed at me, "you stuck my boy Dino. Why shouldn't I bury you both?" I swallowed hard, but something in me, maybe stupidity, maybe pride, made me speak. "Because I'm fast, Mr. Capone, and I'm loyal. I didn't run to save myself. I ran to save Frankie. You need men who'll fight for you, not just for cash." Dino snorted, but Capone's lips twitched into a smile. "Ballsy kid," he said. "All right, Vinny, you're in. But you screw up, you're fish food. Frankie, you're driving tonight. Got a shipment coming in from Cicero. Don't mess it up." That was how I became one of Capone's boys, a cog in his empire of booze and bullets. The next few months were a blur of late-night runs, dodging cops and rival gangs. I learned to drive a truck loaded with whiskey barrels through back roads at 90 miles an hour, to spot a Fed by the way he held his cigarette, to bribe a beat cop with a wink and a 20. But it wasn't all glamour. I saw things, men beaten to pulp over a missed payment, a speakeasy torched because the owner mouthed off, and I felt the weight of it, the way the life clawed at your soul. One night in a warehouse off Halsted Street, I met her Clara. She was a singer at one of Capone's joints, with hair like midnight and a voice that could make a priest forget his vows. I was unloading crates when she slipped in, her sequin dress catching the dim light. "You're the new guy," she said, her voice low, teasing. "Heard your trouble." "Only the good kind," I shot back, trying to sound smoother than I felt. Her laugh was like a shot of bourbon warm. "Dangerous?" "Careful, Vinny," she said, stepping closer. "This city eats boys like you." I didn't know then that Clara was more than a singer, that she had her own secrets, her own game. But that night, as she slipped me a smile and disappeared into the dark, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just a bootlegger anymore. I was a man chasing something bigger, something that might just get me killed. Clara's words stuck with me like a splinter, burrowing deeper every time I saw her at the Four Deuces. She'd sing, her voice weaving through the smoke and chatter, and I'd catch her eye, feeling like the only guy in the room. But Chicago in 1923 wasn't a place for daydreams. By summer, I was neck-deep in Capone's world, running bigger hauls, dodging bullets from Dino Banion's North Side gang. The city was a powder keg, and I was learning fast that loyalty to Capone meant enemies everywhere else. One muggy July night, Frankie and I were hauling a truckload of Canadian rye to a speakeasy in Cicero when trouble found us. We were on a dirt road, the kind that turned to mud when it rained, when headlights flared behind us. Cops? I asked, gripping the wheel. Frankie squinted into the side mirror. Worse. O'Banion's boys. My stomach dropped. O'Banion ran the north side with an iron fist, and he hated Capone's guts. The headlights grew closer, and I heard the unmistakable roar of a V8 engine. I floored the gas, the truck rattling like it might shake apart. Hold on, I growled, swerving onto a side road lined with cornfields. The crates in the back clattered, and I prayed the whiskey wouldn't spill. A shot rang out, shattering the rear window. Frankie cursed, pulling a revolver from his coat. Keep driving, Vinny. I'll handle him. He leaned out the window, firing blindly into the dark. The chasing car, a sleek Pierce Arrow, swerved, but didn't slow. Another shot hit the truck's fender, and I yanked the wheel, sending us skidding toward a ditch. Frankie, we ain't outrunning him, I shouted. Then we fight, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He grabbed a Tommy gun from under the seat, the same kind I'd held that first night at the docks. Pull over. Now. I didn't argue. I slammed the brakes, the truck sliding to a stop in the mud. Frankie was out before the dust settled, spraying bullets into the night. I grabbed my own pistol, a snub-nose .38, and dove behind the truck. The Pierce Arrow screeched to a halt, and 3 men spilled out, their guns blazing. Bullets tore through the cornstalks, and I fired back, my hands shaking but my aim true. One of O'Banion's guys dropped, clutching his leg, but the other 2 kept coming. Frankie was a machine, his Tommy gun roaring, but then I heard a grunt and saw him stumble. Blood bloomed on his shirt, dark and wet. Frankie! I screamed, firing wildly to cover him as he fell. I dragged him behind the truck, his breath ragged. Stay with me, damn it! Get the hooch out, he gasped. Burn it if you have to. Don't let him take it. I didn't have time to think. One of O'Banion's men was closing in, a hulking figure with a shotgun. I fired twice, hitting him in the shoulder, and he went down. The third guy hesitated, then bolted back to the Pierce Arrow, tires squealing as he fled. The night went quiet, save for Frankie's labored breathing and the drip of whiskey from a punctured crate. I tore my shirt, pressing it to Frankie's wound. You're gonna be fine, I lied, my voice cracking. He grinned, weak but real. Always knew you had it in you, Vinny, he said. Now get me to a dock. I drove like a madman to a back alley Sawbones in Cicero, one of Capone's guys who didn't ask questions. Frankie made it barely. The doc said the bullet missed his heart by an inch. As I sat in the dim room, watching Frankie sleep, I realized how close I'd come to losing him. And I realized something else. This life wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival, about proving I could stand tall in a city that wanted to break me. Clara found me the next night at the Four Deuces, her eyes searching mine as she slid into the booth. Heard about the ambush, she said, her voice soft but sharp. You're lucky to be alive. Lucky ain't the word, I muttered, downing a glass of gin. What do you know about luck, Clara? You sing, you smile, but you're always watching. What's your game? She leaned closer, her perfume like jasmine in danger. Maybe I'm just a girl who likes a man with fire in him, or maybe I know more than you think. Stick around, Vinny. You might find out. Her words were a hook, and I was caught. I didn't know it then, but Clara was playing a game bigger than me, bigger than Capone, and I was about to learn that in Chicago, even love came with a price. Clara's words hung in the air like smoke, curling around my thoughts as I left the Four Deuces that night. The streets of Chicago were alive with the hum of jazz and the clink of glasses, but beneath it all was a current of danger, a city holding its breath before the next explosion. I couldn't shake the feeling that Clara knew something I didn't, that her smile hit a blade. But I was too deep in Capone's world to turn back, and too drawn to her to walk away. By August 1923, I was no longer just a lookout or a driver. Capone had taken a liking to me after the Cicero ambush, calling me the kid with the quick hands. He gave me bigger jobs running payoffs to cops, guarding shipments of gin to speakeasies in the Loop, even roughing up guys who shorted their cut. I was good at it too. The switchblade in my pocket became an extension of my hand, and I learned to stare down men twice my size without flinching. but every job chipped away at something inside me, like a sculptor carving too deep. One evening, Capone called me to his office at the Lexington Hotel, a fortress of marble and muscle where he ran his empire. The room was all dark wood and cigar smoke, with a map of Chicago pinned to the wall, marked with red pins for every speakeasy, warehouse, and rival territory. Capone sat behind a desk, his silk suit immaculate, his eyes cold as a winter lake. "Vinny," he said, sliding a glass of whiskey toward me, "you're doing good. Real good. But I need you for something special. O'Banion's getting bold. He's hitting our trucks, poaching our clients. I want you to send a message." I sipped the whiskey, my throat burning. What kind of message? Capone's smile was all teeth. "There's a flower shop on State Street, O'Banion's front. Tomorrow night, you and Frankie torch it. Make it loud. Let him know we ain't playing." I nodded, but my gut twisted. Burning a shop wasn't just a message, it was war. O'Banion's North Side gang wouldn't take it lying down, and I'd be painting a target on my back. But saying no to Capone wasn't an option. "Consider it done," I said. Frankie was back on his feet by then, though the bullet wound left him slower, his grin a little tighter. When I told him the plan, he lit a cigarette and shook his head. "You sure about this, Vinny? O'Banion's crazy. He'll come for blood." "We don't got a choice," I said. "Capone's orders." Frankie exhaled a plume of smoke. "Then we do it clean. In and out. No mistakes." The next night, we parked a stolen Ford a block from Schofield's flower shop, O'Banion's cover for his bootlegging operation. The street was quiet, the air heavy with the threat of rain. Frankie carried a can of gasoline. I had a Molotov cocktail whiskey bottle, rag, and a prayer it wouldn't blow up in my hand. We moved like shadows, slipping through an alley to the back door. Frankie picked the lock, his hand steady despite the scar on his chest. Inside, the shop smelled of roses and earth, vases lining the shelves like silent witnesses. We worked fast, splashing gasoline over the wooden floor, the counter, the curtains. I lit the rag, the flame licking up the bottle, and tossed it. The fire caught with a whoosh, orange tongues devouring everything. We were halfway out when I heard a shout. Night watchman, some poor sap who'd picked the wrong shift. He came at us with a bat, his eyes wide with panic. "Vinny, go!" Frankie yelled, but I couldn't leave him. I tackled the guy, my fist connecting with his jaw. He went down, groaning, and I dragged him outside before the flames could swallow him. Frankie grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the car as the shop became an inferno, lighting up the night like a beacon. We drove in silence, the glow of the fire fading in the rear view. "You shouldn't have saved him," Frankie said finally. He saw our faces. "He didn't deserve to burn," I snapped. "We're not animals." Frankie's eyes softened, just for a moment. "You're still green, Vinny. This life, it don't leave room for soft." Back at the Four Deuces, Clara was waiting, her sequined dress shimmering under the lights. She pulled me aside, her fingers brushing my arm. "Heard about the flower shop," she whispered. "You're playing a dangerous game, Vinny." I wanted to ask what she meant, but her eyes flicked to the door, where Dino Moretti was watching us, his scar twitching. "Meet me tomorrow," she said, slipping a note into my pocket. "Midnight. Alone." As she walked away, her hips swaying to the jazz, I felt the note burning a hole in my coat. I didn't know it yet, but Clara was about to pull me into a web I couldn't escape, one that would make the fire at the flower shop look like a spark compared to the hell coming my way.